5, hope you're all well. I'm going to continue to read Kensuke's Kingdom from where Mrs. Thorpe left it yesterday. As we know, Michael and Stella Artois are still stranded all alone. I decided I would explore further along the beach, right to the end if I could, just so long that I could keep my cave in view at all times. There were shells here, millions of them, golden shells and pink shells, all thrown up in long lines along the beach. Before long, I came across what seemed like a distance away, like a flat wedge of a rock, protruding only ever so slightly from the sand. Stella was scrabbling excitedly at the edge of it. It turned out not to be a rock at all, but a long sheet of rusted metal, clearly all that was left of the side of a ship's hull, now sunk deep into the sand. I wondered what ship it was, how long it had been wrecked. Had some terrible storm driven her onto the island? Had there been any survivors? Could they still be here? I knelt down into the sand and ran my hand along it. I noticed then a fragment of clear glass lying in the sand nearby, from a bottle perhaps. It was too hot to touch, too hot to handle. It came to me in a flash. Eddie had showed me how to do it. We tried it in the playground at school, hiding behind the dustbins when no one could see us. A piece of paper, a bit of glass and the sun, we had made some fire. I didn't have any paper, but leaves would do. I ran up the beach and gathered whatever I could find from under the trees, bits of cane, twigs, all sorts of leaves. Paper thin tinder dry. I made a small pile on the sand and sat down beside it. I held my piece of glass close to the leaves and angled it to the sun. I had to keep it still, quite still, and wait for the first wisp of smoke. If only I could get a fire lit, if only I could keep it alight, then I could finally sleep at night. It would keep the flies away and the animals too. And sooner or later, a ship had to come by. Someone had to spot the smoke. I sat and I sat. Stella came over to bother me. She wanted to play. I pushed her away. In the end, she went off and sulked, stretching out with a sigh under the shade of the palm trees. The sun was roasting hot, but still nothing happened. My arm was beginning to ache, so I arranged a frame of twigs around the leaves, laid the glass across it, then crouched by it and waited. Still nothing. All of a sudden, Stella sprang up from her sleep, a deep growl in her throat. She turned and ran towards me, wheeling round to bark her fury at the forest. Then I saw what had disturbed her. A shadow under the trees moved and came lumbering on into the sunlight towards us. A monkey, a giant monkey. Not a gibbon at all. He moved slowly on all fours and was brown, ginger brown. An orangutan, I was sure of it. He sat down just a few feet from me and considered me. I dared not move. When he'd seen enough, he scratched his neck, casually turned and made his way on all fours slowly back into the forest. Stella went on growling long after it had gone. So there were orangutans here as well as gibbons. Or perhaps it was an orangutan that made the howling noise and not the gibbons at all. Maybe I've been wrong all along. Once, I saw a Clint Eastwood film and it had an orangutan in there. That one I remembered had been friendly enough. I just really hoped that this one would be the same. Then I saw smoke. I smelt smoke. There was a glow in amongst my pile of leaves. I crouched down at once and blew on it gently. The glow became flames. I put on some more leaves, then a dried twig or two, then some bigger ones. I had fire! I finally had fire! I dashed into the forest and collected all the debris, all the dried up coconut shells, all the wood I could find. Back and forth I went until my fire was roaring and crackling like an inferno. Sparks were flying high into the air. Smoke was rising into the trees behind me. I knew that I could finally rest. I would have to fetch and carry until I was quite certain I had enough to keep it going. Stella, I noticed, would not come with me into the forest but stayed waiting for me by the fire. I knew well enough why. I kept a wary eye out for the orangutan myself, but I was too intent on my fire now, too much to worry about him. My pile of wood was huge by now, but all the same I went back into the forest just one last time. Just in case the fire burned itself out quicker than I had expected. I had to go deeper into the forest, so it took a while. I was coming out of the trees loaded with wood up to my chin, and that's when I realised there was less smoke. Then, through the smoke, I saw him, the orangutan. He was crouching down and scooping sand onto my fire. He stood up and came towards me, now out of smoke. He was not an orangutan at all. He was a man. I wonder who this could be. Chapter 5. Kensuke. He was so diminutive, no taller than me, as old as a man I'd ever seen. He wore nothing but a pair of tattered breeches bunched at his waist, and there was a large knife on his belt. He was thin too, in places under his arms, round his neck and his midriff. His copper brown skin lay in folds about him, almost as if he'd shrunk inside. What little hair he had on his head and his chin. I could see at once that he was very agitated, his chin trembling, his heavily hooded eyes accusing and angry. Demeter, he screeched at me. His whole body was shaking with fury. I backed away as he scuttled to the beach towards me. He waved his stick wildly at me. Ancient and skeletal he may have been, but he was fast, running almost. Demuda! I had no idea what he was saying. It sounded like Chinese or Japanese or something. I was about to turn and run when Stella, who strangely had not barked at him all, suddenly left my side and bounded towards him. Her hackles were up. She was not growling. To my astonishment, she greeted him like he was an old friend of hers. He was no more than a few feet away from me when he stopped. We stood and we looked at each other in silence. He was leaning on his stick, trying to catch his breath. American? British? Yes, I said, relieved to have understood something at last. English, I'm English. It seemed a struggle for him to get the words out. No good. Fire, no good. Understand? No good. He seemed less angry now. But my father and my mother, they might see it. They might see the smoke. It was plain he didn't understand me, so I pointed out to the sea by way of explanation. Out there! They're out there! They'll see the fire! They'll come and catch me! Instantly he became aggressive again. He shrieked his stick at me. No fire! I thought for a moment he was going to attack me, but he didn't. Instead, he began to rake through the sand at my feet with his stick. He was drawing an outline of something, jabbering something all the time. It looked like something, kind of a fruit at first, a nut maybe. But now I understood. It was a map of the island. When it was done, he fell on his knees beside it and piled up mounds of sand, one at each, on the end of the two hills. Then, very deliberately, he etched out a straight line, top to bottom, cutting the smaller end of the island from the larger one. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. So have a think about who could this mysterious man be? Do you think he will help Michael find his parents? Tune in tomorrow and see what Miss Hempfield has got to read. Take care, Year 5.